Hello and welcome to this Lightwave tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to set up a very basic nodal network to control a DP kit style animation to add bullet time style effects. So here we've got a very basic thing here. As you can see, it's just some blocks falling to make assembly, but say at some point we wanted to actually stop the blocks falling yet continue with the camera move. It might be just to add a little bit of an identification box to one of the particular parts, or it might be just for artistic interest. But anyway, I'll show you how it's done, and it's really quite simple, and we'll get on with it now. Okay, well, I've started here with a completely blank Lightwave scene just to make things nice and straightforward to demonstrate what we're actually going to do. Okay, well, one of the problems we have in Lightwave when we're doing nodal animation is we don't actually have any sort of global variables. Well, you may remember from any programming you ever did, I haven't done anything since I used the ZX81 back, a long time ago, that one of the things you have in computer language is variables, which are things that can actually be changed by various inputs and outputs and then used in various other ways within a program to actually change other things. So we don't have this in Lightwave, we don't have this in nodes, so what we actually have to do is use a null to represent a variable and use that to store information that we can then plug into other various bits and pieces to actually manipulate those in the way we want to. So how do we get started? Right, let's create a null. We'll call this one bullet time, and we'll just add a little bit of an image, a little bit of a shape, just to make it completely obvious what we're doing. Red, okay, just so we can see what we're doing. You don't really need to do this for most of the time. It's just to make it obvious for the purposes of this demonstration. Okay, so we have a null object. And the first thing we want to do is open up the nodal control panel for the motions. So hit the M key, and under add modifier, we want to add nodal motion. We'll click on that and we have the panel opened up. Okay, we'll close that to get out of the way, and I'll use the Alt and Shift keys just to move that into a position where we can see it, and we've still got the nodal window open. I'm actually not going to use this today, although it does have the frame and time which we will be using during the project, simply because with the probe, in my version of Lightwave, it doesn't actually work to give you the information, whereas if we say open the dB and W time node, you can see with the probe enabled, I actually do get the actual frame and time, which it'll just make things a little bit easier to show for this demonstration. Okay, well, the first thing we need to do is have a couple of constants, because what we need to tell the nodal network is when it needs to start the hold and when it needs to end the hold. So constant, scalar, we'll add a couple of those, and we'll call one, rename, we'll call one start, hold, and we'll call the other one, rename, end, hold. Okay, so we've got start, hold and end, hold. Right, our animation today bog standard 120 frames per second. So let's say we want the animation to start at, say, frame 30 and end at frame 60. Okay, how do we actually manipulate these to get something changing in time? Well, if we just wanted to move something in time, what we could do is just use the frame rate to actually change the position of the null. And I'll just show you quickly how to set that up. First thing you actually need to do is get a make vector, because this is a one-dimensional. This just goes from 0 to 1, whereas the position, as you can see from the blue blob, is actually a vector, so it's got 3 values. So if we plug that in there and we want to manipulate the Y to move it in Y. So we'll plug frame into Y. Oh, and it's gone off the screen. So we don't want that, we want to make things easy. So we'll just add a divide node, just for housekeeping purposes. It'll just keep it on the screen so we can see what we're doing. So we go to math, scalar, divide, plug that into there, plug that into there, and we'll just divide by 100 so it moves in centimetres rather than metres. Okay, so now if we move, we can see our null is moving according to time. But that doesn't help us with our time stopping. So how do we actually make it hold in time? But the easiest way of doing it is to actually use logic nodes. So go back to math, and here we have a logic node. Right, I'll just briefly unplug that so we can actually show you what it does. Plug the output into Y. You can see it's got two outputs. So if A is equal to B, then the output of 1, and if it's false you get an output of 0. At the moment A is not equal to B, so nothing happens. But if we change that to 1, we can see it is, and all of a sudden our item moves up 1 meter in the Y. Excellent. Okay, so how do we actually use that to control our null? Okay, well what we actually need it to be, the start, we want to hold the position if the start position is greater than the frame rate. So if we plug frame into A, that into B, and we set that to be A is greater than B. Right, okay, so what we have now, as long as that A is greater, then it actually moves up. We have a 1 output. So how do we actually make that move our animation? What we need to do is actually make the output be true. So we'll add our divide node back in. And if we plug frame into that being true, what we now have is an animation that moves, gets to frame 30, stops, pops down to 0. But it's actually getting to frame 30 and stops, so we know we've got the first part of our network sorted. Okay, so how do we make it stay into that position? Well, we know we've got that position there. We can hold that position at 30 frames by plugging that into false. So if the argument is false, then now we have a position that goes there, it rises, gets to frame 30, and it stops. Way. So how do we get the rest working, you're asking yourselves? Well, we've got our end position here. So we'll duplicate that, so copy, paste, have another logic node, and we'll unplug that for the moment. So now we need to do basically the same sort of thing. End hold position goes into A, frame goes into B, but this time we want it to be less than, because we're going in the other direction. But if we just plug that into there, what we see is now nothing happens, and then it just pops up by 1. So we need to do the same thing again. We need to actually use the variables we've got here to actually drive the positions of the output when nothing's happening. But we don't just want to plug in the frame. If we just plug in the frame to the output, what we get is basically nothing happens, and then it jumps up to this position which we don't want. So how do we get rid of that? Well, what we can do is actually just add a subtract node wherever it's gone, there, and plug the frame into there and subtract the end hold position. Plug that into true, the output, so now we can see nothing happens, and bosh, it starts moving. But it's moving from 0. It's not actually adding it up. But we've already got the hold position there from where it stopped. So all we have to do is do an add, plug those together, and then we have an object that starts moving, stops at frame 30, our hold position. Nothing happens till frame 60, then it starts moving again, and it's moving in a linear fashion. Okay, and the next thing we need to do is actually to plug that into an animation so we can actually use the frame position we've got. Okay, that'll be next. And I didn't record that, did I? Okay, so we're back in our falling blocks scene driven by DP kit. We want to add the bullet time effect too. Okay, so first thing we need to do is we go to items, we need to add a null. We'll just call this bullet. And as we don't need to particularly see it now, I won't bother adding any shapes or colours to it, we'll just leave it as it is. Okay, so we've got our item there, bullet. Go to its motion options, add modifier, nodal motion. And what I'm going to do is actually import the nodes that I used for the last thing that I actually saved. So edit, import nodes, bullet time nodes, and there we have the same network as we had earlier on. So we'll plug that into position, and we want to change our start and end times. So with this, if we just move that to one side for a little bit, we can actually see a good time to start, maybe say frame 140, and then have it say lasting for 40 frames. So start hold time we'll call 140. Whoops. End hold time we'll call 160. Okay, so that's not going to affect our animation yet, because you can see the null moving that's in the background there, but it's not actually controlling anything. So we can close that down, and we go into our DP kit part info thing. So we'll select the cubes, and with this one, because the DP kit has a displacement mode, instead of using the motion options, we need to go to the object properties and edit nodes. And as you can see at the moment, we've got a time info node. Let's just move that around a little bit so you know what you see. We've got a time info DB kit, same as we had before, driving the animation. So what we actually need to do is get rid of that and actually replace that with an item info. So again, type in the quick box if you want to know what you're looking for quickly. But this comes through, set that as for the bullet null. Close that down, but you'll notice that comes in with a position as a vector. We need to split that out, so we need to go to vector to scalar, so we're converting a vector to a scalar value. Double click on that, plug in position, and set that to the channel we're using, which in this case was the Y channel. And the next thing we do, if you remember, we actually had the housekeeping node that set everything into centimetres. So we need to multiply it by 100 to actually get it back to what it might be as time. So if we delete that, go back to math, scalar, multiply. If you'd taken out the multiply from the other end, you can leave this bit out, but it does make things a little bit easier when I'm showing you what's happening. So we'll plug that into there, and we'll multiply it by 100. So then, instead of the time info, we can unplug that because we're no longer using that frame info, and we can unplug the position of our null. So now what we have is our freeze frame effect between frames 160, 140 and 160. And there we go, that's how you do a bullet time effect with nodal animation. Thank you for watching.